This is the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Jason, and today I'm joined by writer and game designer Andrew Shields. Andrew's work was recently seen in John Harper's game Blades in the Dark, and he was the principal author on a heist deck for that game. He has also been the author of the text for several system-neutral decks for Inkwell Ideas, most recently science fiction NPCs and monster NPCs. And he's also done a little bit of work for us in Codex. We're super excited to have him. Andrew, welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast.
Well, thank you.
So we are going to talk about Black Space, which is a game that you have coming to Kickstarter pretty soon. Give us an overview of Black Space. What's it all about?
As far as the kind of thing you would expect to do in the game, we're talking about a situation where corporations have expanded out into space faster than governments. So we have kind of this Wild West environment, less about sovereignty and more about the bottom line for the shareholders. And so you've got this Wild West sort of setup, and it's under-regulated with all kinds of exotic surprises and environments. And basically it's designed to be kind of pulpy and to have a blank canvas to do all the sorts of things you'd want to do in an environment like that.
Awesome. So it's a science fiction game, and it's OSR, correct?
Well, that's a difficult question because, I mean, what is the OSR really?
I know. I wish we had an hour to go through it.
Maybe what I would find a more valuable way to address that is to say the rules are not complex, and so it's more focused on getting stuck into the action and as a table coming up with how you want to apply the rules to various situations. So, I mean, it is very much customizable to how your group wants to use the rules. And I think that's where the OSR and more indie games connect. You know, the idea that the rules are in service to what's going on instead of the other way around.
I couldn't possibly agree more. I mean, I absolutely 100% agree with that. Based off the Black Hack, right?
It is. Yeah, it basically takes that as a rules chassis. And then, I can't leave things alone. So I had to make it fit more comfortably. We all have abstractions we're comfortable with and abstractions that chafe us a bit. And so, it's just a matter of saying, how does this fit for me? What kind of experiment do I want to do here?
We've never really covered the Black Hack on this show much. I ran some sessions of it a long time ago when it first came out, and I think we talked about it a little bit then. But I'd be curious to find out, the Black Hack is frequently hacked, right? I mean, there are lots of Black Hack games out there. I'm curious, what it is about the Black Hack that makes it so appealing in that way. What was it doing for you in terms of your game design?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple questions there. One is, why is it so popular? And the other is, what drew me to it? As far as what brought me into using the Black Hack as the foundation for Black Space was mostly Fandel Arden was looking at it. He said, I want to work on a game with you. I've got my art, my layout design, and my marketing, and I just would like you to write this so that we can work on it together. So it was a collaborative project, and he took the lead in saying, this is where I want to go with it. So I had to look it over and say, is there something I can work with here? Is there an itch that I can scratch with this? Is there some delight in this game that I really want to put to a high polish? And I did find that. There's a lot to love about the chassis of the game to develop further into that science fiction setting.
Well, so I guess mechanically speaking then, in what ways have you personalized it? How is Black Space different from the Black Hack?
Yeah, one of the things that I think makes Black Hack stand out is its informal, rough around the edges tone. It basically says, look, we're going to cut straight to this is the way that a game group would have house ruled if it was a cargo cult.
Right, yeah.
This is a specific way that a game group has been playing D&D, and we're just going to systematize it and package it for you so that you can skip all those 20 years of adjustments and get straight to it. That's my impression. I think that's part of the appeal of it, is that informal joining a game in session kind of feel, right? And I think that's fine.
Sure, yeah.
But I wanted to take the things that were built into that and make it a different tone that was more accessible, more widely accessible. So it didn't feel like you were joining somebody else's group, but it felt like you were picking up a rules-like game to run with it. So organizing the information differently in a way like if I'm trying to figure out a game in the order that I want to see it with stuff next to each other that affects each other and not having to kind of go looking around. It doesn't assume any knowledge like I think Black Hack does. Other things like there's an action and a move, and I said, okay, you've got two actions. That can be 2 combat actions, 2 regular actions, 2 move actions, or split it up however you want. That's kind of streamlining, but it's an adaptation. It's an abstraction I'm more comfortable with.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Well, so yeah, that sounds like a good, like, sort of zoomed out, like, the differences. What about, like, the dice in terms of, like, dice handling and things you do there?
Well, there are a couple of differences. For one, I've cut it down so that there's just a D20 and a D6. Those are the only dice that you need. In the highest OSR tradition of saying that whatever weapon you use is pretty much a D6, and maybe there's a +1 or a +2, but, it's all D6 weaponry. Because basically I say if it's a regular weapon, it's D6. If it has an energy component, like a vibroblade or an energy blade, that's +1. If it's customized somehow, that's +1. So if you have a custom energy weapon, that's +2. And I kept heavy weapons from the Black Hack, where it's +2 for those. So it's harder to hit, but they do more damage. Other dice things that I changed, the default of the game is to offer an array of stats instead of rolling for them. Part of that is to keep it so your highest one is a 15, because in a roll under game, when I was testing it out, finding somebody who had a 16, 17, 18 stats, like, they're always going to hit that, So doing an array, still saying you can optionally roll if you want, but kind of sidestep some of that awkwardness when the stats become so key and important. Also, I finished the job of the game master just doesn't roll anything, not even damage.
Ah, okay, good. I like you're singing my song right now.
Well, if the only thing that you're rolling is damage, then that fundamentally affects the way the players are going to see you. It's like, no, I only pull out the dice to hurt you.
Right? Yeah.
I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying, if you failed your saving throw, you get to roll the damage. So,
I can't recall. Is that how it goes in the Black Hack too? Like, does the GM only roll damage in that, or I can't recall.
A lot of what goes on there. Monsters don't roll to hit. You have monsters you do saving throws to avoid what they're doing to you.
That's right. Okay, so, yeah. It's been a while since I played it.
You have the players who are rolling. So if a dragon is gusting fire at you, then you'd roll dexterity not to get torched, or, if you're getting clubbed. And one of the things that drew me to that is when you're doing melee combat, it's like, okay, so you're saving throw, you're a big, strong guy, you're in melee, you can do your saving throw with strength because you're parrying and knocking their attacks away, as where somebody else is dodging, And so you can do some customization based on your circumstances. It is a step towards fiction first that I like.
Yeah, I'm into that. I'll tell you, the first time I ran Dungeon World, which is a system that, I run the most, the first time I ran it, player-facing roles felt like a revelation to me. It was the first PBTA game I'd ever played. I hadn't played Apocalypse World or anything like that. And it was a total revelation to me because it felt like, as a GM, I could focus on, like, the important things that the GM gets to do,
Sure,
like the really cool, like, fiction, like setting up things for the players to get, kind of wrapped up in so they look awesome, and kind of really focusing on that managing spotlight, all that stuff. And so, yeah, I really love that. I think it's interesting to hear that that's the direction you've gone with it.
And that's also very OSR. I read a story about somebody who was at a convention with one of the luminaries of the OSR. They were fighting lizard men, and he basically said, "I'm going to get up and go to the bathroom. You just keep the fight going. When I get back, let's see if any PCs are still alive, because what happens. The lizard men fight, And so it's very kind of where OSR wraps around to meet some more modern gaming.
Yeah.
And also for me, it underscores. I don't know that this is a difference, because I'd be reluctant to speak for other people who design games. But I felt like the Black Hack, of course, focuses on, for dungeon crawling, combat is the main thing we're here to do. In some ways, the rules kind of point towards combat. Whereas Black Space, really, combat is part of it, but there's also an assumption of a high level of competence with technology, and there's also a very much increased focus on cooperation. So I've designed it to make it as easy as possible to pull a whole group into what's going on, instead of, kind of resolving one person at a time.
Yeah, that's great. Anything else on the, like, mechanical differences you think you want to go into here?
One element of the mechanics that I did do is to bring in a lot of the different subsystems a little bit differently. For example, with the scarcity dice, to see if you are running low when you're using torches, for example, or ammunition. So you roll the die, and if it comes up a 1 or a 2, then you go down to the next size. And I've relegated that pretty much to things with batteries. So, yeah, you still have your ammo die for force fields. You still have it for energy weapons, stuff like that. But if you have a gun that has actual bullets, then count your bullets, right?
Okay.
So it still kind of uses some of those, but in a different way. Like there are two different kinds of energy armor. And one of them is basically a pool of hit points that is degraded and then shuts down. And that's how armor works in the current Black Hack.
All I really want to know about armor is, are you going to have mega damage?
Nah, not in this game. Well, yes and no, actually. Because
I asked in jest, but it sounds like there's an answer here.
There is an answer because now we're talking about vehicles, which is also a major difference between the games. Because the Black Hack is about small groups of skirmishers going into holes and murdering things, whereas of course, Black Space is on sort of a different genre. So, do you want to hear about vehicles a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's do it.
Okay. One of my favorite vehicle systems was West End Games with their scale.
Okay, yeah.
And so what I did was I adapted their scale. So you've got like character and then, medium and then large and capital ships. So you've got like different sized, that's not the West End Games one, but it's closer to what I'm doing in Black Space. And so every time you attack something that's larger in scale, it's easier for you to hit it, but your damage is cut in half.
Oh, that's smart. That sounds really elegant, actually.
So if you have a person who is shooting at a car, then they're +2 to hit the car, but their damage is halved. And if you have a person who is shooting at something that's bigger than a car, like, well, we'll say a stock light freighter, right? They are +4 to hit. They're probably going to hit it, but their damage is divided by 4.
That's really elegant, actually. That's pretty cool.
I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, it's just neat.
And it slides up and down, right? So if you're in a starship and you're up against a capital ship, you can just blaze away at it all day, but it's probably not going to matter. Whereas they're going to have a hard time hitting you. But if they do, it's pretty much guaranteed to rattle your teeth. And the advantage there is I can still use a single D6 for damage.
I see. Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah.
Because that way, if something on a size bigger than you hits you, and they only roll a 2, for you it's a 4. So that's probably already going to bypass some of your defensive systems.
Yeah.
And so also there's a variety of ways ships and vehicles protect themselves. So you've got the ammo die, the usage die, which, is shielding that gets worn down. You roll to see if the battery degrades on it every time it stops damage with a little bit of damage reduction. You got your hull plating, which is straight up damage reduction.
Yeah.
You've got projectors that have reserves of hit points that get worn down. So I can use all of those subsystems from the Black Hack and put them into energy defense systems on ships.
Yeah, that's great. I like the way you've adapted like the sort of core mechanics of the Black Hack to kind of make it do what you want it to do in this science fiction context. That's pretty cool. Let's kind of segue into characters, because I'm imagining we don't really have we're not dealing with wizards and rogues and warriors necessarily, right, in this setting. How does character creation work? What's it all about?
Well, basically, at this point in the game's development, the base game has one character class, and that is Spacer. Now, there's a couple reasons for that. One is because that way everybody has a high level of assumed competence with all modern space technology. So, for example, if I've got 5 characters who are on the bridge during this space battle, I have one of them who's piloting, and one of them who's running the guns, and one of them who's over on the shielding system so that they can customize it. So, let's say your ship has an armor of 2, right? And you've got a shielding system that can take 8 hit points before it shuts down. Well, when the blast comes in, because you've got somebody who's on that system so it's not automatic, they just reduce the damage so that 2 points still get through and are stopped by the holes, so that system will last long.
Yeah.
And you've got somebody who's like, okay, I'm going to be flying the ship to grant advantage to the gunner, right? So then when the gunner is shooting, they've got advantage because of what the pilot was doing. So you have this way, because everybody is a spacer, there's a way to have multiple people in multiple stations in multiple contexts helping each other out. So not just with vehicles, but you can do that with computer systems. You can do that with, a variety of contexts. So it increases the level of default cooperation possible and reduces the problem of, well, the pilot is flying the ship, so, Let's get through this scene so I can matter again. Because I'm a grunt and all I do is shoot stuff. Well, no, you're a spacer.
Right, yeah.
You can go in the back and start repairs, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's kind of the opposite of niche protection. It's niche projection into everybody. It's like there's certain things you have to do to be successful out here.
So are there ways of like personalizing the spacer even? Like if...
Right. And, you know, you might even say, well, that plus the array puts their special snowflake status in danger because they're going to have pretty similar stats. But I don't feel that's true because I've got 3 things customized at the beginning. One is you get 3 traits. And a trait can either be a form of training or knowledge base that you have. It can be cybernetics that you have, and it can be mutations. And so when you start, I mean, if you want a guy who's got 3 mutations, then you start up pretty odd, but you've got some wacky powers. Or you can like totally load up your cybers for, 3 to begin with. You can have 1 of each. So, I mean, these are pervasive enough that people who are going to out there trying to succeed have had access to cybernetics and mutations one way or another. And that provides, with 3 of those, that provides a lot of variety in what you can do. Another thing is there are 12 equipment packs when you start, and each one has a specific purpose.
Yeah.
So there's like an equipment pack for, hand-to-hand weapons, and you just have a variety of those, but they're all custom stuff, right? Or you have a salvage kit, or you've got a doctor's kit, or you've got, a technician's kit. And those have 4 customized items. Really, part of the way the world building for the game works is in looking at the cybers, the mutations, and the equipment kits to see what's possible. And that tells you a lot about the world without having to explain it, right?
Well, that's a good segue. I mean, let's talk about setting a little bit. Is the book, the final, book that we get from the Kickstarter, is it going to have any setting material, or is the setting just implied like you just suggested?
Basically, the setting is built out of a collection of differently inflected sandboxes and mini-systems. I have 2 quick starts that are going to be available at the very beginning. They're available now to people who are playing with me.
Like on Gauntlet Hangouts. Plug.
That's right. The only place to play Black Space is Gauntlet Hangouts. And actually, I do have an open slot for the next 3 games.
You heard it here first. Well, by the time this airs, that may not matter anymore, but yeah.
But it could have.
I'm sure it was a total success in the end. So,
well, the first one, we played the first one last night, and we had a blast. It was a good time. Good. So I wanted to make the quick starts everything that you needed to play, but I just didn't have the heart to cut things because I wanted to keep the full range of options for traits and equipment for starting characters. So that's about 30 pages. They're small pages. They're like 6 by 9. And that basically is everything you need to play the game and to make characters. And then I made a second quick start because I couldn't bear to cut the vehicle stuff out altogether. You need that to play the game. But on the other hand, the vehicle rules are designed as an extension of how you do things normally. So there's the scale issues, and there's some other minor mini-system stuff that the Game Master needs to know. But the Game Master just tells the players about that in passing. That's all they need to, they're up to speed.
I'm glad you kept that as part of the quick start process because just based off our conversation here, that sounds like a really cool part of the game. Like the vehicle stuff sounds really neat.
And I could see how the players don't need it in their hands, but the Game Master does.
Sure. Yeah.
So I put the vehicle stuff and also the beginning setting information and some sample vehicles and also a number of scenarios to play. So the Game Master gets that, and they can run them through a number of, adventures. Because there are 3 main setting pieces in the second quick start. One of them basically says, here are baseline technologies. Because people are going to say, what's the state of robotics, right? I mean, do I have a robot drone? Can I have a sentry gun? Do I have a robot dog? I mean, how far along are we here? And, I mean, the first answer is, of course, as far along as your game group wants to be. I mean, that's customizable. But this provides, if you want a baseline, it kind of goes into a number of different things, like the central government is weak and law enforcement tends to punish property crimes more harshly than people crimes, and most of law enforcement is through bounties. So there's like that piece. It's like 2 pages that just basically says this is some baseline understanding to get, calibration. Then there's one for the scattershot reach, which basically says here's kind of a region of space with a few landmarks and a touch of history, and that's like 1 page. And then there is the Lu patronage, is what it's called. And it describes a wealthy family that rules a planet who keeps a stable of spacers on hand to troubleshoot. And so all of the scenarios assume that you have Lu as a patron, and he sends you out to go do this stuff on behalf of the family, right? And basically the adventures are just, here's a setup. Here are some potential complications if they're getting bored or it's too easy. And here are some stats for what's involved. Go nuts. I mean, that's like the whole of it. So if you blow through one really fast, or if it's not grabbing your people, pull out, go into another one, or one of them could turn into 3 game sessions because they go deep and hard with the NPCs and it's all exciting and, you don't know.
Yep. It can always happen. Yep.
So it's designed to be flexible that way so that you can extend it or shorten it based on what your game group is doing. So that's in the second quick start. So those will be available to people who play with me and also to anyone who backs the Kickstarter. Because at that point, it's like, okay, you've got a game.
Right.
Regardless of what else happens, you can start playing now and have a blast,
Right.
But I have other sandbox methods of doing exposition too. To jump to the Kickstarter as far as structure goes.
Sure, yeah, go on.
As soon as it funds, there will be a structure that says this is how you generate what bounties are available nearby.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah.
And then every $100 will be 3 more bounties and 1 more bounty hunter that will be added to it. So that, ideally in the end, you have 30 bounties and 10 bounty hunters who may be your friends, maybe your rivals, maybe your enemies. That's kind of up to you guys to work out. But that way, it's like if things are getting slow, or if you have like, okay, we've got 45 minutes left. I don't want to quit early. What's on the Cortex? Who's wanted nearby? And then you can just like quickly generate out a bounty hunt and go make some cash.
Nice.
So that's like another way of building in world building that's kind of a mini system independent rather than saying read about the world. It's more like here, as we see the backstories of the bounties and the backstories of the bounty hunters and see what kind of, how they ended up on the Cortex and why you're hunting them and how likely they are to recur if you miss them, then, that's world building too.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned the Kickstarter. Let's swing over to that. Let's talk about the campaign. I mean, what are you aiming for here? What are we trying to fund for the Kickstarter?
Well, the actual most basic level of funding is pretty low because basically that's just like some money for me for what I've written and to put together the basic book, which is basically the 2 quick starts rounded out with some additional material. But then as it goes on, you've got the bounty hunting structure, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. One of the reasons that we kickstarted in the first place is because we wanted Fandel Arden's excellent art. He worked on The Labyrinth of Souls. He's behind Mapforge and Pro Fantasy. He worked on Mindjammer. Most recently, I believe, Call of Cthulhu 7. He's done a bunch of maps, starting with Down Darker Trails. He's doing the primary art load. We also have Marcin involved. He's done some great character portraits that have made for some really exciting prefabricated characters. So we want to make sure that we can get the best work we can, at a fair price. And that means instead of just working on spec or getting it out of our own finances, getting some Kickstarter help.
Listeners, you may also know Fandel's work from Codex. He has been the cover artist for the last about 6 months, I think, as well as having done some interior art. That's super exciting to hear. I'm a huge fan of his art.
Yeah.
What I love about his art is there's an insane amount of detail in every image he draws. Like I look at it on a computer, right? And you can zoom in on like any one thing he's drawn and it seems to zoom forever. Like there's such fine detail in everything he does. So yeah, that's a great reason to back the project in my opinion, because I know the art's going to be really, really good.
And he's excited about the project. And this kind of, sort of bleak and commercial outer space thing is something that I think he's been really looking forward to working on, because it'd be a good kind of stretch and excitement to work on some of these alien vistas.
Yeah. So we've got the book, we've got the Bounty Hunter framework, we've got all that stuff. What else is going to be happening in the Kickstarter?
Well, one thing that I'm really hoping that we hit, so it's placed pretty low, is a deck of cards that helps you make characters. Because as I said, they're the traits and the equipment packs and so forth to make characters. And having those so that you can kind of deal out traits and then have people deal 2 and they pick 1 and you can trade with other people. The way that the character generation is built is you can choose if you want or you can randomize if you want. And the advantage there is you have people who can play the character that they want to play, or if they just want to get stuck in, you don't have choice paralysis.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
You can just like immediately generate a character, with a handful of dice. And the advantage that the deck would bring to that is being able to like trade cards with other people. It's like, oh, I've got braided muscle that lets me spend a hit point to, get advantage or succeed in something, but I make rubbery squeaking noises when I move. That's gross and I don't want it. And somebody else can be like, that's really nice. Give me that.
That's almost got like a sort of almost like a board gaming quality to it in a way, right? Like using like these trading elements to like figure out the character you want to play or whatever. It's kind of cool.
It's something I learned from another game before this, and part of the real advantage is it does help build some camaraderie around the table if you actually have a physical table, and it can be kind of fun. Another reward will be a card deck that helps you build missions, and that's more lonely fun, but that means that you've got people coming over in an hour and they're going to want to play Black Space, and you're like, and you've just managed to ram down some microwave food, and you're like, I need something to run. And so, that's where it's helpful to have the patronage of Lou, mini adventures, and you've got the bounty hunting sandbox structure, and the mission deck would also help generate some things to do, along with some complications, some rewards you might be seeking, who's in the way, that kind of thing. If you want to make this a beer and pretzels game, that's easy to do. It's a low barrier to investment, a low barrier to entry, as far as sit down, pick up some stuff, play with your friends. If somebody's never played a game before, they can come do this,
Yeah, that's all. I love that. You mentioned like the idea of just needing a mission or adventure like last minute. I would literally spend all my time just using the mission generator to make missions, even things I would never play. I would do it.
Well, because there is an element of lonely fun,
Yeah, I love it. It's the best part of role playing. It's half the fun of role playing games. I don't care what anybody says.
And the other thing too is, even if you don't use it strictly as written, it gets you thinking. It's like, oh, I pull this, and it's like, oh, this is about glittering caverns that have resonance that has to be captured with our instrumentation. So what we need is a frequency from this location. It's like, oh, that reminds me of that thing that I read in National Geographic. Well, and then you go over and you want to do that. Well, fine, go do that. This is just to help you. This is not to tell you what to do.
Yeah, it's cool.
And I've had really good success with the heist deck I did for Blades in the Dark. People have really enjoyed having those extra bits of flavor and structure to kind of help them get going. And then once you get the push, you're fine. And these aren't going to tell you what to do, but they are going to put more toys in your toy box.
Super cool.
And also, we will have, as stretch goals, nodes that get developed that have things like megacities, abandoned colonies, harsh weather planets, death planets, that sort of thing. So that'll have some basic information about if you want to do adventures here, here's some ideas, some stuff to kickstart your own creativity, some obstacles to face that you may not have thought of, diabolical twists that you can add, whatever story is going on here. Here's a disaster that can interrupt it. Best when those are fictional. So that kind of thing. And then we have a really big project in the background that if we were wildly successful, it would unlock the big project in the background. Otherwise, that'll wait for another day.
You want to share the big project? I think we'd like to hear about it.
The big project in the background is Lost Guardian. It's a generational ship, 50 kilometers long. And
oh, I love this. I can already tell where this is going. This is cool.
So it's basically a nodal construct, and I've already written it. I wrote it to be system neutral first. I adapted it to a different system, and now I'll be adapting it to Black Space. Whether it's part of this project or its own project down the line is the question. But it's got adventuring nodes that are connected to each other. So the beauty of that is you can add your own nodes, and I can also release them one or two at a time that can just kind of plug in like Legos.
That's cool. Yeah, that's super cool.
And the way that it's built to begin with is your ship has stumbled across it, and is disabled by the much larger ship's leftover systems, and you get pulled in. And so there are 3 big things that you have to get your ship operational again so you can escape. And so basically the way it's designed is if you have one evening of play, for like a one-shot, you can pick one of those things that your characters do, and everybody else in the crew does the others, or they don't even come up. And so that's your one shot of play. If you want to use it as an arc, then you have to get everything and then you escape. That's great. That was like a good 4 to 6 nights of gaming. If you want to use that as your campaign starter, right? So there's a lot of flexibility in how you use the material, and even some recommendations if you don't want to start with a smashed ship, how else can you use the material? Because it's filled out with traps, dangers, treasures, factions that are all looking out for each other, that are dealing with each other, and then you just kind of come into that ecosystem. So it's like there's an endless series of how when you upset the balance, all of this mobile is going to shift, so the adventures go on forever.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. In the Gauntlet, we do lots of, only open table play, right? We do open table like for 4 or 5 sessions, at a time, or that is to say, we schedule 4 or 5 sessions of an event or whatever, and anybody can join, right? And so you sometimes don't know who you're going to have from month to month, right? Or sometimes from session to session. And so I love the idea of this structure that lets you, it sounds like it would accommodate open table play pretty easily, because you could do different levels of like arc, right?
And this is actually what I'm playing this month. They crashed into the Lost Guardian.
Ah, cool. Awesome.
And so what I did to accommodate open play is their ship has cryogenic chambers. And if they wake everybody up, for one, you have to feed them, and for another, their bonuses go to like 5,000%, so your profit for the expedition is gone. So the 3 crew that were awake were like, no, we got this. But if somebody else shows up for the next session, we'll thaw them out and they can join the crew. And if anybody can't make it, they stay back and guard the ship.
Awesome. Well, so when are you anticipating launching the Kickstarter?
That's always an interesting question. Our plan is November 1st, or, the beginning of November. Part of the tension is always going to be the ambiguity of Kickstarter as far as, is this a pre-ordering platform or is it a patronage site? It's important to me and to Vandel that as soon as you pledge for the Kickstarter, you have a game that you can play.
Okay.
So if everything goes wrong after that, the fall of Western civilization, you got a game.
Nothing else, you got this. Yep.
and so basically it's a matter of how much do we have to have done before we get started. And we're in the process of continuing filling out, what we have done. I'm working on stretch goals, working on rounding out some of the corners, because I took what was going to be the game and split it into 2 quick starts. So now it's like, well, for the main book, okay, we got to put some more things in it. So that's happening. But also want to be sensitive to keeping it small and tight and pocket-sized so that it doesn't get intimidating. Because I've discovered it doesn't really matter how concise or inspired the material is. If it passes a certain page count, people won't look at it.
Really good insight, actually. That's a smart, clever insight. I see a great big book and I shut down. I'm like, nope, can't do it. Sorry.
Right. It doesn't matter. So in that case, you want to be careful. But each of the quick starts without art and the proper loving touch of a graphic designer are about 30 pages each. I would expect the book wouldn't exceed 120, like tops. Because that's with the art and everything, because it's like there comes a point that the added value of more material is counterbalanced by the advantage of sparseness.
Awesome. Cool. Well, listeners, we will update the notes and stuff with Kickstarter dates once we have them when this episode goes live, and we'll be sure to inform you in all the various Gauntlet places too when the Kickstarter goes live. It sounds like a really, really thoughtful approach to hacking the Black Hack for this science fiction setting. I'm pretty excited about it, Andrew. I think it's going to be really, really cool.
Well, excellent. I appreciate that.
Let's go ahead and go to Giving Me Life.
All right.
Gauntlet Con is coming October 20th through 22nd. Registration for patrons is just around the corner, and let me whet your appetite. I'm just going to talk about games here. As you'd expect, There's more powered by the Apocalypse RPGs than you can shake a stick at, with Dungeon World, Sagas of the Icelanders, Apocalypse World, Fallen Empires, Legend of the Elements, Space Worm vs. Moonicorn, Murderous Ghosts, Blades in the Dark, and yes, that's kind of PBTA, Worldwide Wrestling, City of Mist, and Urban Shadows. We've also got Dungeon Crawl Classics, The Black Hack, The Rad Hack, Kalmata Live, a BX game, World of Dungeons, Earth Dawn, and Godbound. Is that not good enough? How about some more? Fate Accelerated, Swords Without Master, Heroes of the Hearth, Tenra Bansho Zero, Golden Sky Stories, Rocker Boys, and Vending Machines. Oh, you'd rather play in some games run by their designers. Oh, how about Monster Hearts and Dream Askew by Avery Alder, Sig by Jason Pitt, Pugmire by Eddie Webb, Alas for the Awful Sea by Haley Gordon, Happiest Apocalypse on Earth by Christopher Gray, Threadbare by Stephanie Bryant, The Veil Cascade by Fraser Simons, High Plains Samurai by Todd Crapper, Dust Fog and the Glowing Embers by Slade Stoller, or Melandros by Tom McGrenery. Oh, I see. You'd rather play some bleeding edge games that are still in development. How about Hydro Hackers from Phil Vecchione? Bite Me from Becky Annison, Paul Sega's latest joint, Traverser, Afterlife from Liz C, Sword's Edge, Faith Explosion from Fraser Ronald, Awoke from Jonathan Lavallee, Poutine by Adam Robichaux, or Cartel from Mark Diaz-Truman. That's just a sample of some of the games. There are more being added. You need to be a patron to be able to get in early, so please sign up on our Gauntlet Patreon site so that you get the announcement when registration goes live. It's going to be awesome.
It's Giving Me Life. This is the segment where we each talk about something that's lately inspiring us or giving us joy, not necessarily related to role-playing games, although mine is going to be. So the thing giving me life, at this very moment, this precise moment today that we're recording, we have managed to get a bunch of Gauntlet stuff off our plates, and I'm freaking thrilled about it. We have got Volume 2 of Codex humming, which is great. The Discern Realities Annual, which you've heard us talk about a lot, is done and out in people's hands. I'm so excited about that. The Gauntlet Con schedule is finished. There are over 100 sessions scheduled for the weekend of Gauntlet Con. Really, really amazing. It just feels good to be fulfilling various promises and obligations that we've made in the Gauntlet. So it feels nice to deliver on things and to have things done. So that is definitely giving me life.
Because every opportunity is a problem in disguise. So it's best to keep those opportunities turned into real achievements. That's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Andrew, what's giving you life?
For me, I'm very satisfied right now because I've started writing fiction again. I've taken a break from it for a while, but I'm working on the official Blades in the Dark novel.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow.
Rather than going through traditional publishing routes, I'm doing a Patreon for it. So every 2 weeks, there's a 5,000-word chapter, and it's been very gratifying to get back into doing some fiction and also to shifting gears from what it's like to run Blades in the Dark or to design things for Blades in the Dark and instead write in Blades in the Dark.
That's super cool, yeah.
Because really when you're gaming, your focus is to provide a foundation that can open up in 100 ways. As opposed to when you're writing, it's a process of taking 100 things and deciding on one through line.
Right.
One is all that you get. You may have 1,000 ideas, but one is all you get in the end. So it's like, in some ways, an inverted process. But I do my best work when I'm doing fiction and game design, and I can switch back and forth between them. And I've been doing game design alone for maybe too long. So starting up fiction again is much gratifying.
Awesome. Super cool. Well, that's our show. Andrew, thanks so much for coming on the show. We were so happy to have you.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate the invitation.
Where can we find you on social media? Do you have a website? My
website is Fictive Fantasies, is a WordPress blog. So Fictive Fantasies is what I go by there. And on G+, I'm Andrew Shields. And so there's a smiling, meaty-headed fella in my picture. And I'm happy to connect with people there.
Awesome. And listeners, we, of course, can be found on our community page, The Gauntlet, that is. Just go to the community section of G+, and search for The Gauntlet. You will find us there. We have a website. It's gauntlet-rpg.com. We're on Twitter at GauntletRPG. And if you love what we do, please go support us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/gauntlet. Thanks again, Andrew.
I appreciate the invitation.
And thanks, listeners. Take care.